On December 4th, 2024, a 26-year-old Ivy League graduate named Luigi Mangione had shot and killed the CEO of United Healthcare on a Manhattan sidewalk. He left a note. It said in part, "These parasites simply had it coming." Within 48 hours, half the internet had decided he was a folk hero. They were not people who thought murder was fine, but rather people who had spent years watching their parents get denied life-saving treatments on technicalities. People who had gone bankrupt over medical bills while United Healthcare posted record profits. Nobody could fully condemn him. Nobody could fully defend him. And that discomfort is exactly what tonight's episode is about. For tonight's episode, the question nobody in a position of power wants you to actually think through. Do you have to be the villain to achieve something good? Let's start with the thing we pretend isn't true. Every person we call a hero in history books did something, at some point, that they could not fully justify. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War, detained people without trial. No charges, no due process. Mandela authorized bombings as part of the ANC's armed resistance. Gandhi ran campaigns of mass civil disobedience that he knew would provoke violent state response. And the violence fell on ordinary people, not him. The Founding Fathers wrote, "All men are created equal," while personally owning human beings. None of them were clean, and we know this. But we do a very specific thing with this knowledge. We wait until they win, and then we clean their hands for them in the retelling. The dirty parts get footnoted. The necessary parts get highlighted. And the story we tell ourselves is, well, they were complicated, but ultimately good. We never tell the people who lost a story in that way, but that's a separate conversation. But the point is this. The idea that you can make real, structural change with clean hands is mostly a story we tell people after the change has happened, to make the cost seem worth it. And the moment is almost never clean. Clean hands are a luxury. They're what you get to have when you're not the one who needed to change anything. Now, let's look at the fictional versions of this, because fiction is where we've been working through these questions for decades. First is Adrian Veidt, or Ozymandias, from Watchmen. By the time the other characters confront him, he's already done it. He's killed 3 million people in a single moment. He fabricated an alien attack. Or, if you are only familiar with the movie, then he created a nuclear blast on several cities globally. He terrified the world into temporary peace. And the maddening thing about Watchmen is that the math might actually work. The nuclear war that Veidt prevented would have killed far more than 3 million. We don't know. The book ends ambiguously on purpose. Maybe he's the greatest humanitarian in history. Maybe he is the most efficient mass murderer who ever lived. Maybe both. Ozymandias represents the utilitarian version of this question. The end justifies the means, if the ends are large enough. And the reason this is terrifying isn't because it's obviously wrong. It's because it's not obviously wrong. The math might actually check out, and that is so much more uncomfortable than a straightforward villain. Second, Magneto. Erich Lenscher survived Auschwitz. He watched humans do the absolute worst they are capable of, specifically to people who were different from them. He decided, from direct personal evidence, that the only safe position for mutants was to be powerful enough that humans couldn't touch them. His methods are often monstrous. His logic is completely coherent. And the X-Men universe keeps circling the same uncomfortable truth. Magneto is usually proven right. The humans usually do eventually betray the mutants. The professor's optimism keeps getting tested and broken. The man everyone calls a villain keeps turning out to have read the situation more accurately than the hero. Magneto represents the cycle version of this question. Even justified violence becomes the next generation's atrocity. He does terrible things in response to terrible things that were done to him. And his methods, in turn, give the next generation of humans a reason to fear and hate mutants, which justifies the next wave of Magneto's methods. The compromise doesn't end the cycle, it is the cycle. Third, Light Yagami Death Note. Light starts with a genuinely good impulse. The world is full of criminals the system can't touch. He has a supernatural tool that can reach them. He uses it, and then, slowly, over 37 episodes, he becomes unable to tell the difference between justice and himself. By the end, he's killing people who threaten his own power and calling it justice. He started as someone who wanted to clean up the world. He ended up as someone who just wanted to be the one who decided who deserves to live. Light Yagami is a tragic version. The compromise doesn't just cost him something externally, it corrupts the internal compass. You start doing bad things for good reasons, and after enough bad things, you lose the ability to clearly see the good reasons anymore. The villain isn't someone you become, it's something that happens to you incrementally, one justification at a time. And then there's Thanos. I'll be quick about this one because he gets used as the example a lot, but he's actually the weakest version of the argument. His math is genuinely terrible. Killing half of all life to solve resource scarcity makes no sense if you can just create more resources with infinite power. He's what happens when someone wants to play the role of the necessary villain without actually doing the necessary thinking. Now back to Luigi Mangione. His diary, entered into evidence, says he researched UnitedHealthcare for months. He believed the US healthcare system was killing people at a scale through profit-driven claim denials. He believed the people running that system knew what they were doing and kept doing it. He wrote, "The target is insurance. It checks every box." He did the math like Ozymandias. The math said, one death, enough public attention, maybe systemic change. The math was wrong, by the way. The United Healthcare stock dropped briefly and then recovered. The system didn't change. Brian Thompson's family lost a husband and a father, and Luigi Mangione is currently in federal holding facility, facing a first-degree murder charge. But here's what the internet's reaction to him proved. The ordinary people watching this unfold understood the logic even when they couldn't condone the act. The discomfort wasn't, well, I don't know if murder is wrong. The discomfort was, I completely understand why someone got to this point. And that understanding scares me. When a murderer becomes a folk hero, that isn't a failure of public morality. That is a verdict on the system that produced him. Let me bring this somewhere personal because I think this episode only works if I'm honest about where this question actually comes from for me. Growing up in the Philippines, there is a thing you figure out pretty quickly, and it's this. The system here doesn't reward being good, it punishes it. We talked about this in the last episode. The land of impunity, the way corruption is so deeply embedded that it isn't even hidden anymore. And if you grow up trying to be decent inside a machine that was designed to grind decency up, you start asking a very specific version of tonight's question. Do you have to play dirty to eventually do clean things? And in order to actually change something here, you need power. And in order to get power in a system this corrupt, you almost certainly have to do corrupt things in order to secure it. The person who stays clean never gets into the room where the decisions get made. The person who gets into the room has usually left some of themselves at the door. And that's a fucked up thing to have to admit about the country you grew up in. And I don't have a clean answer to that. I genuinely don't. I think about Magneto's cycle, that the compromise becomes the thing that justifies the next compromise, and the next. And you end up in Light Yagami territory before you even notice a drift. I think about Ozymandias' math, and the fact that we don't actually know if it worked, and we never will. But I also think about the people who refused to compromise, who kept their hands clean, who said, I won't be the villain to do good. And I look at what they actually changed. And the honest answer a lot of the time is not much, not fast enough, not at the scale the problem needed. Maybe the question isn't whether you have to be the villain. Maybe the question is whether you can be the villain temporarily for a specific purpose and then stop. Because that's what every story gets wrong about this. Every story frames it as binary. You're the hero or you're the villain. And once you cross the line, you can't come back. But real life doesn't work that way. Real people make compromises and then live with them and try to do better next time. The question isn't, will this corrupt me forever? The question is, can I carry the cost of this honestly without pretending I didn't pay it? Here's the thing I actually believe after sitting with this question for a long time. Most of the people who did genuinely important things in history were not good people in the clean sense. They were people who had a specific goal that mattered more to them than their own moral comfort. And they paid for that. Sometimes they paid publicly, in disgrace or exile or prison. Sometimes they paid privately, in the thing that left them after it was done. Sometimes they didn't even know they were paying until it was too late. And every corrupt system that has ever existed knows this about you. It is counting on the fact that the threshold for doing something bad to doing something good is high enough that most people won't cross it. The cost is prohibitive, that the moral discomfort is just uncomfortable enough to keep you where you are. Which is why the question isn't really, should I be the villain to do good? The question is, what is the system counting on you being too scared to do? I'm not saying go shoot a CEO. I want to be very clear about that. What I'm saying is, the fear of getting your hands dirty has been weaponized against you. The system that rewards corruption is also the system that will call you a villain the second you step out of line. It gets to define villain because it won the last argument. And it has been using that definition to keep you exactly where you are. And maybe the real work is figuring out what the version of getting your hands dirty is that you can actually live with. The dirty thing that doesn't compromise the goal it was supposed to serve. Ozymandias couldn't live with the ambiguity of not knowing if it worked. Light Yagami couldn't live with the question of whether he was the corruption. Magneto couldn't break the cycle because he was inside it. None of them asked the question, can I carry this honestly? They all just carried it forward until it carried them. Don't do that. That's Evel's Midnight Thesis.
Take responsibly. Or better yet, take responsibility.